anything about politics. This is the show where you can ask me anything that you like about politics, and you will get a sincere and accurate and objective answer. There is no such thing as a dumb question. I do not believe in making fun of people for not knowing things or trying to learn new things. So, it doesn't matter how simple or complicated your question might be, just throw it in the chat and we will get to answering it. I know that politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. And so this is the place where you can ask all of those questions, and there's not going to be any judgment or roasting or debating. Everyone is welcome here, whether you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in between, or something on the outskirts. What's up, Mia Zelby Adventures? Good to see you again. So yeah, there's no fighting here. There's no roasting. There's no judgments. You don't got to worry about if I ask this question, he's going to think I'm some sort of MAGA person, or if I ask this question, he's going to think I'm some sort of a libtard cuck person. There's no judgments here whatsoever. So if you're a MAGA person, you want to ask a Democratic question, this is exactly the place where you can do it. Elvis says, it's amazing how Biden added 10 trillion to our national debt in 4 years. Trump's fixing it libtards. So Elvis, that is not a question, and also it is inaccurate. If you do not ask a question, I'm going to boot you. All right, excellent start to the live stream, everybody. If you got any questions about politics, just let me know in the chat. Put your questions in the chat. Everyone is welcome. Republican, Democrat, everything in the middle, everything on the outskirts. There'll be no judgments, no roasting, no debating. This is not a show for fighting. This is not a show for debating. It is just good faith answers to all good faith questions. Name me Mochi says, Elvis, Elvis, Elvis. How embarrassing to meet another brainwashed Trump supporter. We don't fight people here. Name me Mochi. I appreciate that. I don't think that's the real Elvis. Rash says, down with imperialists America. That is also not a question. Scott Heffelfinger says, is the United States a democracy or a constitutional federal republic? They're not really mutually exclusive. Like, we have a representative democracy. So we vote for the people that represent us. I don't really see that being substantively different than a full democracy or a constitutional federal republic. It really seems like we're splitting hairs here. Zohair says, what do you think about Pakistan and India? I don't really know a lot about their politics. I know the government of India is pretty right wing, which is obviously very concerning. I support the independence of nation states, and I hope that everybody has is being taken care of by their respective governments. Action Turn Up says, is Trump a socialist? He's a socialist, for giant corporations and rich people, but for everybody else, we have to have elite stage capitalism. Miaz says, do you think we're headed into war with Venezuela? I don't think unless people start putting a lot of pressure on their Republican representatives in Congress, the Trump administration wants to start a war with Venezuela. That is what they're going to do. And so unless Congress does something and Congress is in the hands of the Republican Party, then it is very likely that we're going to war with Venezuela. Abby says, did you like Charlie Kirk? No, very much I did not. Name me Mochi says, democracy does not equate to Democrat, just as a Republic does not equate to Republican. That is accurate. Name me Mochi. All right. Action Turn Up says, are today's political world leading to a one world government? I mean, that seems like more of like a 100-year project than a 5 or 10-year project even. Mia's Elvic, but I also don't think that, like the sovereign nations of the world are eager to establish a one world government. I think that they're all pretty happy with the way that things are. But as globalization becomes more and more, and the boundaries between the countries become a little bit less substantive, then we might start moving towards more of a singular global government. Okay, Mia says, war is big money for rich people, question mark. It 100% is, especially if you are in the fossil fuel industry, because Trump is actively stealing oil from Venezuela to give to his fossil fuel billionaire buddies. What's up, King? Good to see you again. Action Turn Up says, will we hand politics over to AI government? I won't. I certainly hope that you don't either. Patriot says, the Americas will be the last one to accept it. I don't know what that means. T-Wing says, I don't know if I've asked you this before. Sorry if yes, but what are your thoughts on I think that's a trans flag that you put there. I mean, I'm a Democrat, so I support the LGBTQ community, the LGBTQ plus community. Alrighty. Let's see here. Okay, excellent questions to the live stream so far. Okay, Rash says, down with imperialist America. Can you go 5 minutes without warmongering? We can, but the Republican Party is fully in bed with the military-industrial complex, so it is very much not going to happen with Republicans in charge. Additionally, Donald Trump doesn't really give a shit about other people getting killed in wars, so long as he makes a buck. So yeah, we're in a bad place right now. The American government's in a bad place. JC says, is Trump a Russian asset? Nobody knows that for certain, but there's really no difference between what he would be doing, you know, if he's not, what he's doing as president is what a Russian asset would be doing. There's no daylight between that. He's acting like he is one, is basically the long and short of it. Shiv says, why do people value dumb things like quality of life and happiness more than shareholder value? That's a really good question, Shiv. It's funny, are you Walmart? Like, are you the physical manifestation of late stage capitalism? Paul Duncan just says, no, that's not a question. Catfish Man says, definitely not in a bad place. We were for sure with Sleepy Joe. That's not a question, Catfish Man. I don't care if you have different political beliefs than me, but actually ask a question and you can stay. Otherwise, I'm gonna boot you if you are just here spreading right-wing propaganda. Tiger Snipes says, do you take requests for live? I do take requests, but I am mercurial about accepting requests. Sometimes I'll go a whole show with no guests. Sometimes I'll have a couple. It is just based on my whims. So you can stick around, hang out. Maybe you'll get lucky. But yeah, that's the only way to get brought up. Always Cybertruth says, America is a successfully failed science experiment or about to be. No, I don't think so. I think that there are certain things where there are certain areas where America has failed to live up to its promise. I think that is the most the nicest way that I could possibly phrase that. But there's no definitive end to the American experiments. We can save it. We can still save it. If me and other good people do the work, we can save it. Scott says, have you heard the theory that they're building a data center under the East Wing? I have, and honestly, it seems like a pretty timid conspiracy theory. Like, what Trump is doing is wrong. I don't think that we need to add to it. If it really is a data center, it's exactly as stupid as, as them building a ballroom there. Rachel says, which country would you choose to move to? I've visited a whole bunch of countries, and I loved Japan. I thought Japan was incredible. But yeah, I'd probably just go to Canada because it's the easiest transition. Good to see you again, Enriquez Bustos. Rachel says, I'm so ready. Yeah, I mean, that's one way of doing it. Me and my wife have talked about it, but we have decided to stay and fight instead. Tiger Snipes says, I understand all howling out for sure, not looking for debates, just open dialogue. Oh, I'd love to hear that, Tiger Snipes. James says, is the current interest in Nigeria about Christians or oil? I mean, I think where the Trump administration is concerned, they don't really give a shit about Christian prosecution. So if they're claiming that, then it's most assuredly bullshit. But they sometimes do that to curry favor with their Christian nationalist base. But yeah, it's likely that it's about oil. Don't Stay Straight says, you ready to engage in honest discussion today? I am ready to engage in honest discussion today. Jonathan Krause over on YouTube, my old buddy from high school, says, isn't it possible Trump falls asleep in all those cabinet meetings because he's working so tirelessly for the American people? I suppose it's possible, Jonathan Krause, but I just had jury duty and we learned the difference between reasonable doubt and beyond a shadow of a doubt. And I believe that would fall specifically under reasonable doubt. Madi says, do you believe there is a slaughtering of Christians, or do you think that news the made up? I think it's possible that it's happening somewhere. I just haven't heard about it. Ron says, are you opposed to charge a cry tax and see all the Chicago Bear fans go broke. We don't do that kind of sports roasting here on the show. Jack, great to see you again. Says, what are the biggest agendas in the news that you see shoved down throats often? I guess the big one is like telling the masses like everything is fine and you're doing great. So, for example, when I was a waiter, I saw a news story about this new thing called staycations, which was like this rich person spin on us not being able to afford to take vacations to other locations. So shit like that, I would say you just got to be kind of like looking out for. Is this something that a rich person is putting out there in order to sort of like, tamp down our rampant rage at the inequity of late stage capitalism? Kanko Bihar says, do you believe APAC should be allowed to influence domestic politics? I don't think that any lobbying organization should be able to influence domestic politics. So the same way that I have a problem with APAC, I have a problem with the Heritage Foundation and the Federalist Society. Yeah, I don't believe that we should that's the only bad lobbying group out there. Kanko Bahar. Scott says, let them eat cereal. There we go. James says, is it a coincidence that most wrapper label companies owned by a certain demographic? I don't know what you're referring to there, James. Seems kind of sus to me, though. Not the wrap companies thing. Like, you saying that is a little sus. John Serta says, do you think the Catholic monarchy should be restored? No, I do not. Monarchies are bad. Scott says, James is being anti-Semitic. That's what I figured. Penny Build says, will the U.S. cease to be the global currency within the next 20 years? I don't know. I don't really make predictions here on the show. I will say that Donald Trump is basically doing that work inadvertently. Like he is devaluing the dollar, and he is making America an unstable trading partner and global ally to the point where now we are incentivizing the world to move on to a different global currency. Okay, Babylon, I don't know what that means. Tiger Snipe says, do you feel like Ukraine should join NATO? If not, why? I do think that Ukraine should be allowed to join NATO, if only because we have discovered that Russia is exactly the threat that NATO was formed in order to try to avoid. And I don't think that Putin would be in Ukraine right now if they were in NATO. There we go. Petty Built says, great assertion. Thank you. I don't remember what I said. Twisted Logic says he might be the last USA president, ? Who, Donald Trump? I don't think so. Matty J says, what are your thoughts on the Islam narrative going around? I don't know what the Islam narrative is that is going around. Wasmen Sky Dow says, what you think about Phalangism Franco in Spain? I don't know too much about that, unfortunately. Jack says, roughly how many votes do you think are not cast solely on not wanting a woman in office? Oh, that's a good question, Jack. Like how many votes did Kamala Harris not get because people had either an unconscious or conscious bias against voting for a woman for president? I don't know. Like, let's say all the people that didn't vote for Kamala or voted Republican instead of voting for Kamala, but would have voted for a man instead. All those people, I don't know, maybe 10, 15%, something like that. Okay, Shifts, this is being hyper wealthy harm anyone if it's all in stock and none of the cash is in circulation? 100% it does. With currency being the way that it is, money is not an unlimited resource. That is part of the reason why, that is part of how we avoid rampant inflation, is by recognizing that money is not a limitless resource. And so if one person has $1 trillion, that means that the rest of us have less because they have all of that. All right, James says, since the end of the gold-based dollar, is the economy now based off of consumerism? That's a little over my head, James. I'm so sorry about that. Gwen says, are you worried that Trump could just stay in office? I am worried that he's going to try. I do not think that he will be successful. It is really up to us. At the end of the day, it is up to us to make sure that we stop him by striking, protesting, boycotting, putting political pressure on politicians, giant corporations, wealthy people, voting, doing outreach, talking to people, convincing them, recruiting them, shit like that. Tiger Snipe says, do you think the U.S. economy has come to an end with $1 trillion interest payments annually now? I don't. I mean, I think it's taken a massive hit, but whatever a person can do, another person can undo, and vice versa. So I am concerned. I do not believe that the American economy is going to completely dissolve by the end of Trump's presidency. It'll be severely wounded, I think, is the best case scenario. All right, Twisted Logic says, no political power will preserve this raise. Will preserve, I don't know what that means, Twisted Logic. Okay, Petty Bank says, do centralized banks have any allegiance to a specific political party? That's a little over my head, Petty Bill. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see here. Shiv, I already did that one. Maddie J says, basically, is Islam compatible with Western culture? Yeah, every religion has their extremist wing, and there are already people who practice Islam here in America who fit into Western culture perfectly fine. There's an extremist wing of Christianity that we're somehow fine with because they look like us and because they celebrate a religion that is close to a religion that a lot of us practice. So yeah, this idea that there is a specific religion that doesn't work in Western culture it's a little, like white nationalist or Christian nationalist propaganda, I would say. All right, it's going on the bottom. Spider Kev says, why is capitalism goated? I would argue that capitalism is not goated, Spider Kev. Would you like to get into it? Tiger Snipes says, debt doesn't work that way, right? You can't undo debt, just repay it. With $1 trillion in interest, we could not pay. Yeah, no, I agree with that, Tiger Snipe. But the reason why our debt is where it is because we have a deficit in the budget. If we balance the budget and we were able to have a surplus, then we could eventually, get rid of that massive interest payment. Liam says, accept my request. No, I don't follow orders, Liam. But if you stick around, maybe you'll get lucky. Sometimes I bring people up, sometimes I don't. I am mercurial. I am like a all-powerful God King of the live stream. I bring people up when I like. Okay, H8, good to see you. Spider Kev says, why not, bro? I guess if you look around at what's going on in America, you got people who are billionaires who are flying around on private jets, going to their mega yachts and their mega mansions, having lobster and caviar 3 meals a day. They can pay high-powered lawyers to keep them from being legally accountable for fucking anything. There's no more campaign finance laws under Donald Trump, so they can bribe politicians to do what they want. And at the same time as that happening, people are starving to death on the street. People can't afford health care. They can't afford a college education. They can't afford housing. And so that's capitalism right there. Capitalism did that. So that's why it's not goated. There are better systems out there, Spider Kev. Marie says, would it be easier to add Supreme Court justices or impeach justices? It would be easier to add Supreme Court justices. You only need 50 votes. To add a Supreme Court justice, you would need, I believe, 2/3 of the Senate, so 67 votes, in order to impeach a Supreme Court justice. Kitschy says, that's just corruption, not capitalism's fault. I mean, I would argue, and many other people would argue, Kitschy, that it is the logical conclusion of capitalism. Corruption is the logical conclusion of capitalism. If we give voting to money, then this is what happens. Okay, Spider Kids, I definitely agree. We need more regulation and social safety nets. Would you be open to a social democracy? I think that's what you mean by SocDem. I mean, I consider myself a progressive Democrat, and those are pretty similar ideologies, I would say, Spider Kev. So yeah, I don't believe that we need to outlaw capitalism, but I think we have a little bit too much of it in America right now. We could use a little bit more socialism and communism, in my opinion. H8, thank you so much. You're my favorite chud. Book Smarty says, give the president the right to pardon is ridiculous. I completely agree with that. Let's get rid of the presidential pardon. Let's talk to our politicians and say, how do you feel about getting rid of the presidential pardon? I'm for it. I would love it if you were for it. Let's go. D. Scott says, we need another Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah, he was all right, I guess. Zay Miruko says, is Elon in politics now? I would argue he's never left. Z. Cedro says, happy Hanukkah. Applesauce or sour cream? I go sour cream, I suppose. Okay, let's see here. KPM says socialism will not work inherently. It is a good idea, but not practical. So KPM, I disagree with that. We currently have socialism here in America. Socialism is working everywhere that they have universal health care. That is socialized health care. It is a government program. Paved roads is socialism. The military is socialism. We have never seen a country try to do socialism fully. Every country that calls itself socialist or communist is actually a dictatorship, and those things are, diametrically opposed. So, yeah, there's my answer to that. Paul Loser says, do you think tariffs are necessary? Yes, sometimes they're necessary, but mostly they're not. Tariffs are a tool that should be used like a scalpel. Donald Trump is not doing that. He is using them like a shotgun, which is a lot less subtle and targeted as a scalpel is. So instead of targeting one specific resource coming out of one specific country, he has started a trade war, America versus the world, and we will lose that trade war. Apex Shadows, his opinion on immigration. It is a net positive on countries. H8 says APAC isn't the only concerning organization. It just gives an excuse for anti-Semitism. That is 100% accurate. HH. Red Ear says, okay, why can't he die? Pieces of shit have a tendency of living forever. It fucking sucks, but, what are you going to do? Secret Squirrel says, wouldn't it require a new amendment to get rid of the pardon since it is an enshrined power? I believe that is accurate, Secret Squirrel. But that does not mean that. It just means it would be harder to do. It doesn't mean that it's impossible. I would also say, Secret Squirrel, that we don't necessarily need to get rid of the presidential pardon power, but maybe we should pass some laws to regulate the presidential pardon power, because there was a difference between Obama commuting nonviolent drug offenders who were sent to jail for dealing what is now currently legal in, I think, half the states, versus Trump pardoning people who give him $500 million, or pardoning the people that attacked the Capitol on January 6th. Thank you, Red Ear. Philip says, what's funny is seeing MAGA people explain what they want to find out. They are communist socialists. It's funny to see MAGA people explain what they want to find out that they're communist socialists. Yeah, a lot of people have been lied to about what it means to be a Republican, what it means to be a Democrat, what socialism means, what communism means, James says, were the muckrakers of the Gilded Age mode harder on robber barons than now? That's a little over my head, James. So sorry about that. Okay, no problem, Philip. You're all good. All right, excellent question so far, everybody. We are back. We are back on our regular schedule. Jury duty is over. Secret Squirrel says, oh, I agree. We could easier put limitations or requirements on the presidential pardon. Yeah, but let's not stop there, I say. Somebody needs to prove to me that the presidential pardon is necessary. Like, what is the value of it, Nurse Ratcheted says, it will take decades to undo the destruction Trump has done. I half agree with that, Nurse. I believe that the damage that Trump has done is substantive, and it is substantial. But the more people that do the work to undo it, the quicker that it gets undone. So, okay. Cass Toaster says, name every politician ever. I can't do that. I can only name every female politician ever, and that's Whitney Houston. Okay, Kasha, thank you for the taps. I appreciate that. Okay, everybody. Jury duty is done. We're back on our regular schedule of 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We're going to be doing that today. We're doing that tomorrow. We're doing that Friday. And then we got the holidays. So come on in. The water's great. Ask your questions before the holiday season. Come in and ask your questions. If you got questions that you need answered before Christmas, this is the place where you got to do it, everybody. And thank you, Kasha, for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. So, yeah, any questions about politics, just let me know. Put them in the chat. Everybody is welcome here. Democrats, Republican, everything in the middle and on the outskirts. There's no such thing as a dumb question. We don't believe in fighting here. We believe in engaging on politics so that we can all have a shared understanding of what is going on in our country and world. Zamuruka says, what's your opinion on the recent Piers versus Nick? I mean, kudos to Piers Morgan for breaking the story that Nick Fuentes is a virgin. It's just like, I guess that's good information for us all to have, so that the red pill community who are viewing people with extreme right-wing ideologies as somehow being more masculine recognize that they are being led by a dude who has never had sex in his entire life, or at least never had sex with a woman his entire life. So, no judgments to virgins out there. I was one for longer than I would like to admit. But yeah, I don't love Piers Morgan. I just think that he is doing the bare minimum of standing up to a guy who is full-throatedly misogynistic and racist and anti-Semitic. Secret Squirrel, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Nurse Ratcheted says, what's your take on Susie Wiles? So Susie Wiles is interesting. So for anybody who doesn't know, she just did this like massive interview, I believe with Vanity Fair, where she was really saying a lot of things that a lawyer would tell her she should not have been saying. And I think that that's interesting. I think it's interesting that she feels comfortable to admit things that are legally dubious, potentially putting people in the Trump administration in legal hot water, potentially pissing off large swaths of America. But she also says in the interview that she's good at her job because she just lets Trump do whatever he wants. So, like, I think that it's cool that we have somebody in that office who is cool with being honest about how shitty they are at their job and how bad Trump is fucking us all over, even inadvertently. I wonder if Trump is going to be upset about that. I don't think he's going to be. I don't think that he really gets into the specifics of the things that she is saying. But she basically was like, she admitted her, what do you call it? She admitted her naivete by looking at Vladimir Putin and being like, it seems like he really likes Trump. I don't know what the fuck's going on, And at the same time, admitting that Trump knows that Putin wants Ukraine, that he's not going to be satisfied with peace. So she's like both spilling the tea and admitting that she sucks at her job and admitting that she is naive. It's a fucking weird ass combination of qualities. Let's see here. Thomas says, if you're educating on politics, you shouldn't cling to one side of the aisle. Otherwise, you are biased. I disagree with that, Thomas. I think that it shows a level of understanding about what's going on politically in America, to understand that one party is better than the other, Thomas. Guys, don't make fun of Thomas. He said that as more respectfully than lots of people say that. So yeah, we're not mad at him for making that comment. So yeah, I would love to discuss that with you, Thomas. Let me know what you think about that. Let's see here. Philip Leonard says, I don't think a president should be able to pardon anybody. I completely agree with that. Spaniard says, what do you think of Jasmine Crockett's chances? I don't know how she's polling, but she's very charismatic. She's a good speaker. I don't think that the people of Texas can vote for a bad Democrat if their options are Crockett and Tallarico. I think those are both great options. And thank you, Kasha, for helping me reach my third gift goal of the day. Kenneth says, what is the latest on the 2024 election fraud? So the organization that was bringing the lawsuits to try to figure in Rockland County to try to figure out what was going on with the discrepancies in the vote counts, their case was thrown out on a technicality. And so they're currently working on, what's the word I'm looking for? They're appealing the decision. They are working on revitalizing the case. It doesn't really matter what we find out as far as like vote totals being changed in 2024. Trump will still be president. There's really no undoing that. What we should be doing now in regards to election integrity are the same things that we should be doing if we discover that there were votes changed in 2024, which is that we should all be calling our secretaries of state, depending on who is in charge of our elections, and asking them, what are we doing to make sure that everybody's votes are counted equally? What are we using one of those voting machines that is owned by a company that is a fan of Donald Trump? Is there oversight into that? How do we know that they are not putting code in their machines to throw races to Republican politicians? It is up to us to do that. If you live in a purple state or a red state, then we know that they like cheating and stealing to win. So you have to do the work of making sure that they do their job, of making sure that the election is free and fair. Let's see here. Thomas says, I just think the correct way to persuade people to your side, not push them away from the other, but fair. You're live, man. I get you. Yeah, I'm not here telling people that they're idiots for voting Republicans or anything, but I don't think that you can be a serious follower of politics and not recognize that one party is better than the other. So I'm happy to engage with everybody on the political spectrum, but I'm not going to act like the sins of the Democratic Party are equal to the sins of the Republican Party, because they're just not. Like, one party is doing some real fucking bad shit, and the other party did a lot of great shit, but is also extremely flawed. Mr. Luther says, isn't it funny how the left is making matching statements to what the right made in 2020? That is not true, Mr. Luther. T-Bone says, yeah, they are much worse. I completely agree with that, T-Bone. So yeah, Mr. Luther, I believe that you are inaccurate about that. To say that the conspiracy theories about elections being stolen in 2020 are equal to the conspiracies about the 2024 election being stolen. For example, the left did not storm the Capitol. The left was not praying outside of, polling locations. It's just not happening, man. It's just not happening. And our politicians aren't out there saying that the election was stolen in 2024, unlike the entire fucking Trump cabinet and all of fucking MAGA Congress will fucking say with their whole ass right now that Trump really won the election in 2020. So there's a real fucking difference there, my guy. Olarin the Red says, is this only USA politics? That's my area of expertise. I know a little bit about other countries, but not a lot. So depending on what your question is, I might have to just say, sorry, I can't answer that. I don't know. T-Bone says, oh God, let the Capitol thing go. What? The fucking insurrection? Are you serious about that, T-Bone? Do you really think that we should just let go the fact that Donald Trump orchestrated an attempted coup on our country? The fact that people died because of that shit? People were beating police officers with fucking fire extinguishers and fucking flag poles. You think we should just let that go? Doesn't really seem to be the move, in my opinion. T-Bone says it was not an insurrection. Okay, well, guess what? You're going to have to ask a question or I'm going to boot you, because that is not the kind of shit that I allow here. T-Bone says, oh, but burning cities is okay. Nobody said that, T-Bone. What you're doing is called both sides-ism, where you make it seem like the thing that your side did was okay because what the other side did something else that was not okay. But again, Nancy Pelosi did not send people to go burn cities down. Those were protests. And the FBI was like, a lot of this was started by right-wing agitators, T-Bone. Again, you got to ask the question or you're going to get booted. I'm not just here to fight with you about what's an insurrection and what's not an insurrection. 50 Diddy says, Trump's so dumb. He said he met with the president of the Virgin Islands. Why didn't MAGA say anything? Because they don't care. They don't care when Trump does something stupid. He is their president and they don't care. I saw somebody on the internet say, I don't care what he says or does. I am with Donald Trump. And that's not the way that shit should be. You should not have unconditional love for a politician. T-Bone says, peaceful protests. All right, that's strike two, T-Bone. If the next thing in the chat is not a good faith question, then you're out of here. Thomas says, both parties just divide and conquer. Investing into politics affects mental health. I agree that sometimes paying attention to politics can be really stressful and can hurt your mental health, Thomas. But I disagree that both parties just divide and conquer. I do not believe that that is the goal of the Democratic Party. There is a big difference between the way that Democratic presidents have talked about the citizens of this country versus Donald Trump and Republican presidents. Republican presidents have said, if you're not with us, you're against us. Donald Trump delayed aid to blue states because they didn't vote for him. Barack Obama said there's no red America or blue America, there's only the United States of America. Joe Biden says, I want to be a president for even the people that didn't vote for me. So did Kamala Harris say that. So you gotta agree with me here, Tom, is that there's a substantive difference between the right and the left in this country. Am I right? My guy? 50 Diddy says, do you think Trump suffers from early dementia? It kind of looks like it. Username BXFloss is 100% the goal of both parties. I mean, I just proved that it wasn't. So can you tell me where I'm wrong here, guy? Thomas says all Republicans don't like Trump being conservative doesn't mean MAGA. That is true, Thomas, but that is not what I am arguing. Okay, Levy says MAGA needs a daddy so bad. Let's just want democracy. Yeah, but let's try to keep the ad hominem attacks at other voters to a what's the word I'm looking for? To a minimum. Thank you. To a minimum. I thanked myself. Veed says, have you read Politics by Aristotle? I did in college. I don't remember a thing about it. T-Bone says, do you feel the left has good faith policies that are for the people? 100% I do, T-Bone. Would you like me to go into more detail? 50 Diddy says, MAGA are scared to admit they have been fooled. I mean, anybody does not want to admit that they were conned, 50 Diddy. And so, again, I do not think that we should be trying to roast other voters. Like, let's focus on politicians. Let's focus on people that have big audiences like Ben Shapiro and Alex Jones and Candace Owens and Charlie Kirk and shit like that. All right. Hello to you, sir, James Carl. Zaya Miruka says, what's your opinion on China now? Will you ever see yourself living in China? I could definitely go visit China. I honestly, I don't have too much I can say about China. I don't have a substantive take on China, shall I say. All right, let's see here. 12 of 9 says, I'm 16 and I think paying attention to politics is distracting from doing important stuff. Well, 12 of 9, I would argue that politics is important stuff. Like, how do you know that the water that you are drinking coming out of your faucet is safe to drink? The people of Flint, Michigan were wrong about that. And that is entirely based, that issue is entirely based on who was elected. There are people alive today because of the Affordable Care Act, which is only possible because people voted for Democrats. And there are women who are dead today because of abortion bans in red states that were only possible because people voted for Republicans. So who you vote for makes a really big difference in your life. So I would argue that politics is the important stuff. Veed says the hypocrisy of Charlie Kirk outrage and then what Trump did with Rob Reiner on Truth Social. Yeah, I mean, the argument that's coming out of the right is that people celebrated on the left when Charlie Kirk died. And I'm sure you could find me some people on social media who were doing that, but the people with big audiences like reporters, content creators, and elected politicians, all of those people on the left were condemning political violence in the strongest possible language. But on the right, you don't see that. On the right, you do see the random people on the internet celebrating when anybody on the left gets murdered. But then you also have people like Alex Jones and Elon Musk and Donald Trump fanning the flames and not condemning political violence or other kinds of violence, or trying to make that violence against those left-wing people, justified because they hated Trump or something like that. Alrighty. John Abbott says, when Biden was asked why his infrastructure bill devoted a majority of the money to states that voted against him, he said because they need it the most. That is 100% accurate, John Abbott. Thomas, what do you think about all this stuff we're talking about here, my guy? Yeah, Thomas, we're talking about the difference between the party, my guy. 3D Printer says, thoughts on anarchism. I know that there are some people who have like substantive debates about like how we could actually institute an anarchist system here in America. I mean, if so, that's a 100-year project. That is not happening anytime soon. I personally don't think that there's really a lot of value to anarchism as a political philosophy. I could be convinced. I'm open to arguments. I just don't see it being a fucking thing. Veed says, Theo Von Rogan 2028. Please fucking God, no. Logan Moore says, please answer. I didn't see your question. Chelsea Ross says, do you think anyone will be held legally accountable? They will if we do the work. Chelsea, it will be very easy for everybody in the Trump administration to get away with this if Democrats don't have enough political power to make sure that they are held accountable. In addition to there being Republicans in Congress, even if Democrats take Congress and the White House in 28, in addition to them being there to gum up the works and obstruct any kind of accountability, they also have a lot of money. And having a lot of money means that you have a different justice system where you're able to exploit loopholes and delay judgments and things like that. So, yeah, we just have to do a lot of work. If that's something that we want, we have to do the work. Okay. I think Thomas is lost in the translation, LMAO. Yeah, I'm a little sus of Thomas just because I'm making points and then he is quiet afterwards. So just looking for the next thing to say as opposed to responding. Defiant says, who's going to control the House when all these Republicans retire? I suppose there's a chance. I don't think it's going to happen, but I suppose there's a chance that so many Republicans retire that Democrats take control of the House before the midterms. Polling wise, it's looking good for Democrats to take control of the House, but I don't do predictions on this show. I would just say if you want Democrats to do well in the midterms, do some work. Logan Moore says, our family's really being split up by ICE with no say in the matter at all. So the answer is yes, and also it's complicated, Logan Moore. So there are some people who are being split up because, their children are receiving medical care here, and their children are citizens because they were born here, but their parents are not legal residents, and so they are being rightfully deported. It's legal, but it is barbaric and inhumane. And depending on the case, you could argue that it is a violation of their due process because they're not actually having a trial. And then there are other people who are being separated from their families because, they're being detained or disappeared by ICE, and they have done absolutely nothing wrong. Like Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a legal resident who did nothing wrong, and he was, the Trump administration was legally prohibited from deporting him, and they did that anyways. So 100% ICE separated that person from his family. Okay, the real JCB says, just hit my comment because the truth is inconvenient and scary. I didn't see it. V says, Democrats definitely have a leg up for the midterms. The elections this year proved it. Yes, but Veed, we don't know what's going to happen 6 months or 8 months or 9 months from now. We have to do the work. Let's act like things are 50-50, and it is only me and you doing the work that is going to get us the good outcome. Johnny Flytrap, great to see you again, says, so if you were to speculate, what do you believe today's address will be about? Maybe Venezuela, maybe he's going to be ramping up things in Venezuela. I have no idea. Maybe it's going to be another stupid executive order claiming powers that he doesn't actually have. So, yeah, I don't know. I think you can really drive yourself crazy trying to predict or figure out the rationale behind the things that Trump does because he's a psychotic man baby. The real JCB says American criminals are separated from their families every day. It was proven that Garcia was MS-13. So that is wildly inaccurate. The real JCB. And yes, it is true that American criminals are separated from their families every day when they go to jail, but those people ideally have a trial, have due process, as opposed to the people that ICE is kidnapping without any kind of justification or due process whatsoever. Also, Garcia was not proven to be MS-13. He is not MS-13. And so, yeah, are you here to spread misinformation, the real JCB, or are you open to the idea that you might be wrong about stuff? Let me know, the real JCB. Smash Mermaid says, meaning liberal anti-racism, which he didn't believe was adequate. I don't know what that means. Ian Moon says, Tallarico or Crockett for Senate, and why? I think they're both great. It's a really close game for me. I'm a little bit more Team Tallarico than Team Crockett, just because I really like his kind of politics of inclusion attitude. If the people who live in Texas vote for Jasmine Crockett instead, she is an awesome choice also. So I don't think they can go wrong, no matter who they vote for there. Donovan Dessel says, unlimited spending in politics does not equal influence. It does, though. Donovan. I'm not really sure why you even said that, because we weren't even talking about it. Marty D says they faked the tattoos on his hand. That is accurate. Teddy says thoughts on Israel. Israel is a country. There are people living there who just want to live their fucking lives, and I think they should be able to. The government of Israel, however, is guilty of war crimes and genocide against the people of Palestine, so we should stop sending them money and weapons. Fletch lives again. Great to see you. I predict Trump will remove more beneficial regulations, pardon more corrupt people, and grift more and more. It's possible, just more of the fucking same shit, you know? Mon says food, human rights at the detentions. I don't know what that means, Mon. Smash Mermaid says MLK is used as the face of liberal anti-racism when he thought it was insufficient. MLK didn't believe you could address racism within capitalism, yet he used to represent liberalism. I still have no idea what you are referring to, Smash Mermaid. Is there a question? Let's see here. Jay says, holy based, dude. Goodness. Thank you. I do consider myself based. Marie says, is there any way to keep Musk out of the midterms? No. No, there is not. We have unlimited spending, and even if we did not, the Trump, Federal Election Commission or whatever is not going to administer any of those rules, particularly if the money that Musk is spending is supporting Republican candidates. Ian Moon says, no loss either way, but I'd like your take on Tellerico Governor, Crockett, Senate, etc. I just think that, so Crockett, I think, is great. She's a great messenger, and she is aggressively anti-Trump. And I think that's really important to get those messages out there so that people recognize what Trump is doing to them and how the problems in their lives are directly related to the decisions that he is making and the corruption that he is making. And I think that is very, very valuable. But I do think that Texas is maybe a little bit of a tougher state for that message, whereas Tellerico's message of, we will convince you that our side is the correct side. And I am doing this for everybody. I think that's a little bit more palatable in Texas. I could be wrong about that. And again, it's a close game. I'm not dogmatically pro or against either of those candidates. Jerome Newry says Texas is going to be blue. From your lips to God's ears, Jerome. If good people like you and me do the work in Texas, then it will. But if we just expect it to happen magically, then we will be disappointed. Let's see here. Huey Freeman says the left is in an echo chamber. We are waiting patiently for them to come out. Huey Freeman, how is it that you know that the left is in an echo chamber? Because you could potentially be in an echo chamber as well. I personally don't consider myself to be in an echo chamber because I get my news from a bunch of different sources. So maybe you can enlighten me on that, my guy. A lot of people who are like, you're dumb, I am right. They never really address the idea of maybe they're wrong. And I find that to be instructive. And I didn't see who helped me reach my last gift goal. So whoever it was, thank you very much. Fletch Lives Again says, good to see you today. How is the jury duty going? It's over for me. It's not for 14 unlucky souls who are going to have to continue going. But for me, it's over. And I told my wife when I got home, I was like, you remember the beginning of the movie Love Actually, when they're showing clips of people greeting their loved ones at the airports, and Hugh Grant is like, if you look at shit like this, you realize that love actually does exist and it's everywhere. I think a close second would be a group of people who just learned that they're not going to be on a jury together. Everybody that left there, it was like fucking V-Day. Somebody dipped a girl and gave her a kiss on the mouth. Everybody was celebrating, going, oh, now we can talk about stuff. And, oh, it's so nice to meet you. And people were showing their numbers. Like, I was next. If they got rid of one more person, I would have been on there. And everyone's like, oh, my God, that must be really stressful. That's the most fun, man. It's so life affirming. It's like, it's like getting cured of some disease that you thought was going to take you, All right. That was enough of a tangent. T-Bone says, what do you think of Mamdani winning New York? I think it was great. And I hope that the people of New York continue to work to help Mamdani with his agenda, because the billionaires are not done with him. They're going to continue trying to stymie his agenda. And so the people of New York are going to have to help. Right. Let's see here. Veed says thoughts on Trump's additional countries ban besides it being obviously xenophobic. You said it, Veed. You know, it's stupid. It is blatantly based on race and religion, which are unconstitutional. It's not going to make us safer. It's not going to make the country better. Yeah, it's just dumb. It's just real bad. Okay, let's see here. Teddy says, good take on Israel, better than all of these moderate Democrats who claim to be leftists. Yeah, you know, I find that the rhetoric around Israel to be really, we have been led by the worst actors in that debate. The people who tell you you have to pick a side between Israel or Hamas. And it's like, you know, any criticism of the Israeli government equals criticism against Jews and Israel and is anti-Semitic. Like, you know, if you're for the people of Palestine, you're a terrorist. Like, all of that rhetoric is bullshit. And yet those seem to be the loudest voices. I wonder why. Okay, let's see here. Scrolling down to the bottom, T-Bone says, do you believe Trump is a felon? There's no belief about it, T-Bone. He is. He was found guilty on 34 felony counts by a jury of his peers, a jury that him and his lawyer agreed was a good and fair jury. So, yeah, he's a felon. He's a felon until he pays his debts to society, until he does something to undo being a felon, and that usually is serving prison time. Okay, Real Benda says, what do you think about those two Hasidic young men harassed and assaulted on the NYC subway? I didn't hear about that, Real Benda. But obviously anybody who is getting harassed based on, you know, their religion or whatever religious garments they are wearing is obviously a fucking travesty. You know, I don't think that we should be harassing people that wear, you know, crucifixes or rosaries. I don't think that we should be accosting people who are wearing hijabs or payas and yarmulkes. You know, Lauren, great to see you again. Luke says serving time doesn't make you not a felon. LMFAO. It makes you a former felon, Luke. So I don't really know what semantic argument, what you think we're going to be gaining from this semantic argument, Luke. Let me know. Let me know what you think. Lauren, great to see you again. I have a gift for you. I'm making you a mod. Alrighty. Let's see here. East meets Westy Bestie. Hello. Did you see me? Did you see my message that I sent you? I sent you an email. East meets Westy. Let me know. Let's see here. Comments, media accounts, blog accounts, panic accounts, Spanish polls, give votes. All right. Okay. Maine Eaton Sandwich says, when do you think the corrupt politicians will start heading to lemonade stands? I don't know what that means. Not Seb says, is Mike Johnson the worst House Speaker in the last few decades? I would argue so, but being the House Speaker for a Republican majority is, without question, the worst job in all of politics. So while we can have a little bit of sympathy for people like John Boehner and Kevin McCarthy and Paul Ryan, even though they're massive pieces of shits, we should also recognize like they're juggling between the most extreme cuckoo bananas version of their party and the most like old school neocon version of their party. And that job is impossible. But of all of those people, I think Mike Johnson is probably the biggest piece of shit of all of them. And thank you, David, for helping me reach my 6th gift goal of the day. I think that's what that was. It was either my 5th or my 6th. I forget. Okay, let's see what we got here. We'll do finger hearts again. Thank you, Mon. I appreciate that. Okay. My live is not eligible for recommendation as restricted for the next 10 minutes because your live does not comply because of harassment and bullying. It happened again, guys. It happened again. Can somebody show me where the harassment and the bullying happened? I didn't even fuck anybody's mom today. Can you fucking believe this shit, guys? Is the harassment and bullying in the room with us right now? Was it me talking about how great it is to be let off of jury duty that got me my life restricted? Guys, can you fucking believe? East meets Westy, I sent you an email to the one that you sent to me. Let me know. Kirsten says you harassed me. That's my wife. I did harass you this morning. That's my bad. Lauren says, talk to Pickles. He has an agency that fights these things. I think I may have the same agency, and they are useless. You know. Let's see here. East Meets Westy says it was the Palestinian conversation. Yeah, maybe. I don't know though. I don't know. Seems like what I was saying was pretty tame. You know. Okay, let's see here. Missa and Diera says, "What do you think of the immigration in Europe?" Immigration is a net positive wherever. Obviously, there's going to be some growing pains if there's like a massive influx of immigrants in a specific country. But yeah, I don't really believe with the rhetoric that immigrants are ruining any country. And I think we need to be really wary of any right-wing politicians that are trying to blame all of our problems on immigrants, regardless of if you are in America or if you are in Europe. And Carmine, great to see you again. I have a gift for you as well. East Meets Westy. All right, yeah, I'll try to send that email again and see. But Merry Christmas, Carmine. You are a mod now. T-Bone says, do you think it was correct for the Democratic Party to push their president out of office? So T-Bone, I think that the way that you phrased that was a little inaccurate. So the Biden administration was kind of like hiding information from the Democratic Party and the American people. They were hiding information about how up to snuff he was for doing this job now or for another 4 years. And so I think it was right that the Democratic Party and Democratic donors were putting pressure on Biden to drop out of the race because they did not believe that he had the ability to do the job for another 4 years. Yeah, you know, and he hid this information. Him and his team hid this information long enough where it was, you know, not viable to have a primary anymore. So, yeah, you know, I wish that they had been more aggressive earlier. I wish they had stood up to him and his team on their assertions that he's running laps around us in these meetings, which is obviously false, you know. So yeah, I don't really view it as an indictment of the Democratic Party that they put pressure on him to drop out of the race. I view it as an indictment of Biden, his family, and his inner circle, that they not only lied to the American people in the Democratic Party, but also even tried to run for another 4 years when he was clearly not physically up to it. T-Bone says, and that's democratic? No, it's not. It's not democratic, but I mean, you could argue that it's a representative democracy and that we voted for the people who put pressure on Biden to drop out. Yeah, you know, democracies can be really messy sometimes, T-Bone. And so where America voted in the primary for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in, you know, the years leading up to the 2024 election, when the president of the United States drops out of the race, then something's got to be done. When the president of the United States has a debate that makes it clear to everybody in the country and the world that he is not physically capable of doing the job, then something has to be done. You know, do you have a better suggestion, T-Bone? Do you think they should have done something different? Let me know. T-Bone says, do you think Harris was a good choice by the party? She was the only choice. She was the only person they could have picked. Picking somebody else would have read as racist or misogynistic. There was no time to have a primary. There were states like Ohio that were threatening to leave the name of the candidate off of their ballot if they did not say who the candidate was before the DNC, before the committee, the convention. And so their hands were tied. There was no other way to do it. Okay. Kid said, and was Trump any better in the debate? So, I mean, there's a couple of things to keep in mind here. Winning a debate does not mean that you are saying things that are accurate or true or good. It just means that you won. And so Trump did do better than Biden in the debate. And an argument could be made that he did better than Kamala Harris in their debate. I know a lot of people who look at the substance of what they were talking about say that Kamala Harris cleaned his clock. But if you're judging based on performance, Trump was much more natural up there. And if what you value is appearing sincere as opposed to actually saying things that are accurate, then you might say that Trump walked away from that debate victorious. Okay. Coolo Kid says, but he didn't answer any questions, ? I mean, yeah, I agree with you, man. I think he's a liar. He's a fucking con artist. He did nothing but up there but bullshit. But that's what debates, that's a way that you can win a debate. If your audience is not discerning enough to recognize that you are lying, then you can win a debate that way. And it's part of the reason why I think debates are stupid. Okay. Party Cut Pizza says, that's why I think debates don't work anymore. Completely agree with that. Jose Arujo says, Sophia's in the house. Oh, I didn't see Sophia came back. That's pretty cool. Oh, there you are, Sophia. Good to see you. T-Bone says, all politicians do that. There's a difference, though, T-Bone. There's a difference between a politician skewing their answer in a way that only half answers the question so they can get to their talking points versus what Trump did, which was just lie, and just, I know there's other words for it. He was making shit up, Okay. Sophia says, do you think stricter gun laws actually decrease mass shootings? I don't think that, Sophia. I know that. Like, we have a lot of data around this. And so that's part of the reason why I vote for Democrats, is because they are the only ones that seem at all interested in solving gun violence. And there are plenty of common sense gun control, laws that even conservative gun owners are on board with. But conservatives have largely been lied to about what the Democratic Party's policies around gun ownership are. Because all that people like, Ben Shapiro or Alex Jones will tell you is that the left is coming for your guns. They're going to take your guns away. They're going to take your guns away. There's not going to be a Second Amendment anymore. They're going to take your guns, and then we're going to be under a fascist dictatorship because we're not going to have guns to protect ourselves from the fascists. But it's never happened. The Democrats were fully in charge of the government at both the beginning of the Obama administration and the Biden administration, and none of that happened. Okay, Sophia did that one already. T-Bone says, then why was there a mass shooting in Australia? So T-Bone, gun control doesn't stop all mass shootings. It just severely limits them. Do you know the last time that there was a mass shooting in Australia? T-Bone, do you know the year that it happened? Let me know. Let me know if you know the year. If anybody knows the year, go ahead and throw that into the chat. T-Bone says, I do not. Party Cut Pizza says 1982, T-Bone. Do you know how many mass shootings we've had in America just this year, T-Bone? Kool-Aid Kid says it was 97, and I think that that's much more accurate, So yeah, 97 was the last mass shooting in Australia. T-Bone says too many. Yeah, it's over 300. So I will take the gun control laws they have in Australia if it means that we only have one mass shooting every, 29 years. Z Sero says 1996. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was like 96, 97, around then. Sophia says before the 1960s, gun laws were more lenient and the number of mass shootings per year was lower than today. Sophia, so what I would call that is a cherry pick statistic in order to prove a point. What you want to do when you're trying to figure out like what's actually going on is you can't be taking information from somebody or an organization that is cherry picking data points in order to forward their agenda. What you want is a statistician. You want somebody that doesn't have a horse in the race to look at the majority of the data and say, all right, how do we solve this problem? And if you do that, if you do talk to somebody like that, then they will tell you that gun control laws is the way that you stop mass shootings. There are people, I'm sure, that can tell you exactly why there were fewer, mass shootings per year in the 1960s than there are today. I think population size probably has something to do with that. I think accessibility of weapons. There were obviously all the guns that were made in the 1960s. A lot of them still exist, and so we have all those guns and the guns that were made every single year after that. Yeah, an increase in political violence, an increase in existential dread because of things like climate change and the cost of living. We're suffering through a crisis of despair in this country. We have there's a thing called like deaths of despair, where people that abuse substances until they pass away, or do self-harm until they pass away, and those have been on the rise for a very long time. And I think that probably correlates to gun violence as well. So yeah, Sophia, let me know what you think about that. T-Bone says, but more people die from car accidents every year. Do we ban cars? Again, T-Bone, that is a talking point from the gun lobby, basically. The difference between car accidents and guns, there's a bunch of things that I want to say about that. So number one, cars have a use besides killing people in accidents. People get from here to there. They take their stuff from place to place. Guns, the entire point of a gun is to put a hole in a thing. And you can argue that that's, their use is self-protection, or their use is in hunting. But I think there's a substantive difference between, a car that is used for transportation accidentally killing somebody, and a gun who half of its value is in its ability to kill people. That's number one. Number two is we regulate car ownership. I, as a progressive Democrat, I only want the same regulations for gun ownership that we have for cars. Insurance, a license, classes. You have to renew your driver's license to make sure that you're still able, and responsible enough to have a car. Why not? Why can't we do the same for gun control? T-Bone. Let's see here. And the third thing that I would tell you is that as a progressive Democrat, I don't like cars either. I would love to get rid of cars and start building our cities around public transportation. Let's all live in walkable cities, so that I don't want to design the infrastructure of my country around everybody owning a car. It's disgusting. How much space we have to devote to parking and driving and highways and stuff like that. So that's my response for you, T-Bone. Let me know what you think. All right. Sophia says strict gun laws only affect law-abiding citizens because criminals will commit crimes no matter what. So it's interesting that we're having this conversation, Sophia, because our previous conversation was about making abortion illegal, which is something that you were in favor of, because you believe that abortion is a wrong thing because it is taking the life of a child. And so the same argument that you are using here about strict gun laws only affect law-abiding citizens, I might say, well, abortion laws only affect poor people, because women who have a lot of money can get their illegal abortions, and it's not going to affect them at all. And criminals will commit crimes, so criminals will do their illegal abortions because they love doing crimes. Sophia. So yeah, I will say this as well. Like, if criminals are going to, there's a difference between something being widely available and something being illegal to obtain. It's easier to get 1,000 guns and 1,000 bullets if it is legal than if it is illegal. And I say, let's make it harder. Let's make it harder to get a gun. I say, let's make it as hard to get a gun as you would like it to be for a woman to get an abortion. What do you think about that? Alrighty. T-Bone says its value is meant and always was to protect you from a tyrannical government. I mean, arguably, we have a tyrannical government right now, T-Bone, but I don't see anybody using their guns to protect American citizens from ICE. All right, David Skip. What about UK politics, bruv? The general state and that. I don't know enough about UK politics to opine on that. So sorry, David. Z Sarah says walkable cities and free public transit would solve so many issues. Completely agree with that. John Abbott says speeding laws, drunk driving laws, reckless driving laws. We have a mountain of laws in place for how cars are allowed to be operated that have the specific purpose of reducing car deaths. Bran says, nah, the gun rules only mess up lawful people from getting protection, hence why we have the Second Amendment. I don't find that to be a convincing argument at all, Branner. David Skip says, oh, but you said anything. Yeah, you can ask. I just don't have all the answers. You know, you can ask me, you know, what did Teddy Roosevelt's dick look like? That's a question about politics, but I don't know the answer. I mean, I do, but I'm not telling you guys. All right, Rini Roxo says it's so sad when women don't think abortion should be legal. I mean, I agree with you, Rini, but you know, I believe that you know, it is worth it to engage in good faith conversations with people who don't agree with us. Okay, Mr. Wales says it's not hard to get an abortion. It is, depending on what state you live in. Sophia says, but the difference is abortion only exists to end a human life. Guns aren't only meant for that. Again, Sophia, we disagree on whether abortion is the ending of a human life. But additionally, I was just commenting on your specific argument about how gun laws would only make it harder for non-criminals to get guns. So yeah, I just don't find that to be a very convincing argument. Like, let's make it harder to get guns, and then maybe fewer people will have guns, and then maybe there'll be fewer mass shootings then. You know, maybe if we require gun owners to take gun safety lessons or have a license or have insurance, then there will be a fiscal incentive for people to lock up their guns and make sure that their mentally unstable children don't take that gun to an elementary school, for example. Oh, right. East meets Westy Bessie says, and with all the gun deaths, when has a good guy ever stopped a mass shooting? I'm sure there are some examples, East meets Westy, but I agree with you. Okay, let's see here. Bran says, so is abortion the ending of a non-human life? No, I just don't think that it's a life until it can exist outside of the womb. Bran? Okay, Bran says, what would be convincing? I'll tell you what, Bran, if you can show me a country that has more gun deaths than America, then I would be convinced that and they have gun control, I will be convinced that gun control is wrong. But right now, every other country has stricter gun laws than us, and every other country has fewer gun deaths and gun violence than us. That seems to be the whole ball game to me. To everybody who is arguing for gun control, that seems to be like the straight flush. It's like, I don't see an argument around that. Let's see here. Joff Leon says, if guns aren't meant to end lives, what are they meant for? I mean, some people would say home protection, and that might equal ending a life of an intruder. But other people might say, oh, just if you intimidate somebody with your gun, then you can, you know, protect your family. Other people might say hunting, you know, which is also ending a life, even if it's not a hunting life, a human life. T-Bone says our population is the most armed in the world. That is accurate. Okay, death stage 4. So deportation is wrong, but abortion is okay. LMAO. Yeah, I agree with that, because deporting. So hold on a second. Death stage 4. I am not arguing that no human being should be deported. That is not the Democrats' position. The Democrats' position is that deportation the Democratic argument is not that deportation is bad in and of itself. It's that there's a good way to do deportation and a bad way to do deportation, and Donald Trump and ICE and Tom Human and Stephen Miller are doing deportations in a wrong, illegal, barbaric, unconstitutional way. There you go, my guy. All right. Rushy North says, do you support Union Pacific buying out Norfolk Southern for $85 billion? I don't know too much about that deal, Rushy North, but I would say that we need to be moving away from hypermonopolization and conglomerization as opposed to moving more into it. Bane says, the only thing I'd say to that is the UK banned guns and knife crime became the new trend. So it's not a checkmate, but that's what I would say. Yeah, well, I would still rather knife crime be a thing than gun crime. You can kill way more people way quicker with a gun than you can with a knife. Okay, John Selfridge says, good to see. First of all, good to see you, John Selfridge. John Selfridge says, good to see you. What do you think about the Republicans signing onto the discharge petition to force a vote on the Affordable Care Act subsidies? I think that there's two things going on here. You have Republicans that recognize that without Affordable Care Act subsidies, they're fucked in the midterms. You got other senators who understand that it is barbaric and inhumane to triple Americans' already overly inflated healthcare costs. So yeah, some combination of that, I would say. All right, everybody, we are over an hour and I have got to get out of here. But I really enjoyed chatting with you guys today. Thank you so much for being here, especially the people that don't agree with me. Obviously, to all of my regulars, y'all are the goats, but I believe that the purpose of this show is engaging with people like T-Bone, like Sophia, like Brain, WG, WXGP, etc., etc. So yeah, if you'd like to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know we're all struggling. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a day. I have a store you can buy things from on my website. Links to both of those things are in my bio. And of course, you can send gifts and become super subscribers and super fans and shit like that on Twitch and TikTok and YouTube. If you have Amazon Prime and you would like a free way to support me, if you subscribe to my Twitch channel using your Amazon Prime account, it costs you $0 and I get $2. So I'd appreciate it if you did that. Shout out to my Twitch subscribers, Triska, Lauren, and Kayslow. Shout out to my TikTok super fans, Susie, Sean, Dean, and Hot Sauce. And shout out to my patrons, Robert, Carmine, Shannon, and Patrick. If you have a question that I was not able to get to today or that you think up later, I want you to email me. I want you to reach out. Do not be shy. And if I don't respond to your first message, you can send it. You can send a second. You can send it to me on a different platform. I won't think that you're weird. I want to be a resource for you guys to be better informed and better engaged in politics and more involved in politics. And so if I can do that for you by answering a question or responding to an email, then fucking send me that email, guys. Use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. One of the ways you can get in touch with me is via my Discord channel. Link is in the bio. I love the Discord because in addition to being able to get in touch with me, you can also form community with other fans of the show. And there are recommendations on there for books and podcasts and great organizations that you should 100% be donating your money and time to. These organizations need people just like you. And whatever you can afford to give, time and money-wise, they will appreciate it. Even if it's $1, even if it's 1 hour a month, they need you. So get out there and do that work. Anything else that I need to say before I get out of here? Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. We are back on this schedule for the rest of this week. Next week is obviously Christmas, so we will be off. And I hope that everybody has a happy holiday. And lastly, I just hope that everybody does the work. And that is the only way that we get out of this. So I will see you guys tomorrow. Be good to each other. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. And check me out on Friday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.